Hi guys, it's the Novice Reader here, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that I haven't heard too much about on BookTube, and that is novels associated with video games. So you may be surprised, but there are actually a lot of novels out there that are associated with video games, and they normally come into two camps, or how I categorize them as two different sections. There's section one, which is the novelization of the video game in question. So, for example, there's Assassin's Creed, they have them. Dead Island is another one. Halo, they have books again that are novelizations of the game. And the second category is what I like to call the expansion category. So that kind of concentrates on the prequels, the sequels, the stories that run in tandem to the game. So they're the stories that help build the lore, and these are kind of areas such as World of Warcraft has quite a few, RuneScape, Bioshock. There's quite a few that have that, and it allows someone who's actually interested in video games to have kind of expansion knowledge and be able to learn a lot more about the world that they're playing in. But if we talk about the first section, which is the novelization of a video game, which is something that I'm not actually too fond of, so much so that I don't actually have a book to hold up for this section. I have plenty of books for the second section, but for this section I don't really have anything, and that's because when I've ever read a novelization of a game, I've normally donated it to charity or given it away, because it's not something I particularly want on my bookshelf for a long period of time. I think it does fill a niche. For example, if you don't really play a video game but you're interested in the story, then you can obviously read a book that's novelized the story. But the problem is normally it doesn't feel right, if that makes sense. So you normally would, like, if they want to novelize the cutscenes of a game, for example, then it's very easy to do. But the gameplay in between cutscenes, not so much, especially when you're supposed to be the player and you're the one controlling it. So that's where it kind of falls downhill. And some examples of this is the early Assassin's Creed books. They are focused on retelling the story as it is in the game, not expanding upon it, not giving you someone else's perspective. The same with some of the earlier Halo novels. And both, I really found that when I was reading them, it was like almost reading like a Let's Play on YouTube, if you know what they are. It's just when you watch someone else play a game. And then just the novel form, it's not great. It's not very interactive, obviously, and you don't really, the gameplay element doesn't come across well in book form. And I think a lot of publishers have understood this because, for example, I'll go back to Assassin's Creed. I read the second one in the series. I'm not sure if there's a first, but I'm pretty sure there is a book related to every one of the main line franchise. Even the side projects of Assassin's Creed, I'm pretty sure they all have novels. So when I read the second one, it was the Ezio story of Assassin's Creed 2, which is very much on par with the story. So you learn about Ezio and his story and going forward and all the different beats that it goes through. But it's mainly just the big beats, but then the gameplay element is there and it just doesn't read right at all. So I wasn't a fan of that. But if you go further on in the series, for example, Assassin's Creed Underworld, which I think is the 8th book in the series, is based off the Assassin's Creed Syndicate game, which is a lot, I think it came out in 2015, and that one's based on Victorian London. And I read that, and that one was actually fantastic. It was based on one of the characters that was a side character in the game, but you got his background, you got his prequel, you got to learn a lot more about him, but you also got to learn a lot more about the London prior to when the main characters of the games come. So it was great on expanding what was already there. So I was a massive fan of the Syndicate game, so having that novel giving me extra information, I really enjoyed. I'm a bit disappointed that it didn't concentrate on the Fry twins, who are the main characters, because I just love those two, and I would love to have, got more of a story for them. But hey ho, it is what it is. Another novelization which I actually think was not too bad was the Dead Island novel. So if you don't know, there's a game called Dead Island. It's about a zombie outbreak on a tropical island, and the novel is very much a beat for beat of the game, which is, it's not too bad in a zombie setting because they can kind of take a bit more liberties with it. But the problem was, again, it was very much like a beat for beat. So I read the book and then watched a recap of the game because I hadn't played it in years, and it was basically, the book was hand for hand the exact same as the game, which is good because you got a bit of background information, but it wasn't as engaging as the game would have been. However, saying that, if you've never played the the game, it would have been a perfect medium to be able to, you know, actually experience the story without playing. So that could be, you know, if you're interested in experiencing these stories, because video game stories are normally really good, then obviously it's a great medium. But otherwise, not my cup of tea. I'm not the biggest fan of them, so I kind of stay away from the novelizations, even though I think most publishers stay away from the novelizations. If you know of any other video game novelizations that you actually enjoy, please put them in the comments, because I'd really like to know. And if there's a game I've never played, then the novelization might be perfect. But section 2, which is the better section, in my opinion, which is the expansion, which is the books that expand upon the story, the things that happen in the background that your character may not have a direct impact in, but nonetheless are really important. So I'll give this first example, and I mentioned World of Warcraft earlier. This is Beyond the Dark Portal, and it's a novel with one of the main characters being Illyria Windrunner. If you don't know anything about World of Warcraft, it means nothing to you. But it's quite interesting that this is based, I'm pretty sure, between the third game, Warcraft 3, and the MMO World of Warcraft. So again, you don't really have any impact in this story, but you get to learn about what happens when these characters, these heroes, go through the Dark Portal and the story and the journey that they go on. And again, it helps build up the overall story of World of Warcraft. And it's really interesting, specifically with this book, because you get to learn about Illyria Windrunner, who actually plays a big part in the most recent World of Warcraft expansion. But again, this isn't a novelization, this is like extra content. So if you're interested in, for example, the Horde, Draenor, or the characters that go through the Dark Portal, what happens to them and what they did and where they end up, then this is a perfect book. And it's written by Aaron Rosenberg and Christy Golden, who are two authors who've worked on a lot of World of Warcraft books and have always done a really good job. I think they're both very talented writers. So if you're interested in World of Warcraft, or if you're interested just in fantasy, I think you can pick these up and you have a great time. They're kind of hard to come by unless you buy them full price. You won't normally find them in the wild, but they're around in places. I think I picked this up in a charity bookshop. But again, yeah, the newer World of Warcraft books aren't as good as the earlier ones. That's mainly because the story of World of Warcraft as a whole is kind of going off the deep end. But this book and the earlier ones are definitely worth your time. So if you are interested, I would pick up some of the World of Warcraft books. Another one which is a bit different is RuneScape. And you might think RuneScape, that point and click game from a billion years ago, I can't believe that has books or, extra lore. And RuneScape, lots of people still play. It's still great, old school RuneScape. Not as much RuneScape 3, but old school RuneScape. And I know lots of people just click through the stories and don't read them and don't listen to them, which I am very guilty of. But there are actually novels that take place in the world of Gielinor, which kind of give extra information and extra background to some characters and some areas. And what I should have said with the World of Warcraft book, and what I should have said about this, is that stories make games better. It's just as simple as that. If you gave someone a game that has the best gameplay in the world and the best graphics and the best sound design, if there's no story, if there's no purpose for what you're doing, then it's just pointless. Even the story's as simple as this person destroyed your village, go take revenge. Like, at least there's a motive, at least there's something, to aim towards. If you don't even have that, then it's just boring and dull. And I think these books help expand that information and help you kind of get more invested in the overall story and make you, you want to be that boss because you've read about it in the book and you know how bad they are and you know what they could do. And like, you as a character, you can beat that now, you be part of that story. And that's what I think is really great about these games. And this is what's great about these novels. So I've got these two. So this is RuneScape, The Gift of Gothics, and The Fall of Hallowvale. I picked up both of these when I was at RuneFest this year. So basically outing myself as a RuneScape player. But both books, fantastic covers, if I say so myself. They're both, or one's written by Erin M. Evans and one's written by Robin McNiven. And they're both, this one is basically about the god Gothics, and this one is about the Fall of Hallowvale, which is an area within RuneScape, and it's just going over the battle that takes place there. And again, you would never have to read these. You would never have to have any understanding to enjoy the game, but by having this insight, you get more information, and in turn, I think makes the gameplay better. So these are the two RuneScape books that I've picked up, and I haven't read them yet, but I'm really looking forward to. And this was the third thing I picked up at RuneFest, and it was a comic, RuneScape Untold Tales of the God Wars. And this was a limited run of 300, and I got number 152. So I picked this up when I was at the at RuneFest, and it's, as you can see, it's just a comic of like some story set within the God Wars within the RuneScape universe. But as you can see, the artwork is amazing. It is so well done, and it is actually a really good story. So I don't know if you can pick these up anymore, but if you can, again, do. And if you're a fan of RuneScape, like, don't miss out on this, because the RuneScape lore is actually fantastic. I say fantastic a lot because I mean it. Another book that comes under this category, which I actually thoroughly enjoyed, was Bioshock Rapture. So this is written by John Shirley, and Bioshock Rapture is a prequel to the game Bioshock. And I'm not gonna lie, I never played Bioshock, which I know, surprising because it's such a big game, but I never played it. So I bought this book, or I got it at a car boot sale, and I read it, and it basically introduces you to everything you need to know about the game. The characters, the lore, the background, the building of this city of Rapture, which is an underwater city built by a billionaire for only basically the rich to go to. And it kind of shows you how it descends into chaos. And then when you go into the first game, you see the world, see this city of Rapture in chaos. So this book shows you the story of how it got there, which I think is almost it's not a must read, but when I started playing the game, I knew the characters. I knew who Atlas was, for example, who's a character who you get to reveal his identity in this, but you don't know his identity in the game until later on. I knew all the areas, so it was great to be able to actually play through areas that I visualized in my mind. All the events that have happened that are recorded in these little tape recorders that you hear as you go through the game, I'd already heard them, and I'd already read through the stories. So I think Bioshock Rapture was a great one, and a really good example of how a prequel can make a game even better. So if you want to, if you're a Bioshock fan, you should pick this up and read this. And I'm want these videos to be a bit quicker than they've been, because they've been about half an hour, the other ones. I don't want that. So very quickly, it's not just video games that have great novels attached to them. It's also board games or tabletop games that kind of expand, again, the knowledge and the lore. They're not needed. You don't need a story for a tabletop game, but it just makes it so much better. And I think one of the best examples of this is the Horus Heresy for Warhammer 40k, and this is basically a story about the Horus Heresy, which is a storyline within the 40k universe about how one of the Primarchs, who's like a demigod sort of character, kind of gets corrupted, and it's his kind of crusade throughout the galaxy. And this is the first book in the series. And if you think about it, Warhammer 40k is little tabletop pieces that you play a game with. You don't need to know this. This doesn't necessarily matter, but having this just makes the game so much more engaged and so much better. And I think a lot of people really love the Horus Heresy. A lot of people, I think there's something like 50 books or something like that crazy. And that is just the Horus Heresy. That's not the other Warhammer 40k books. So again, if you're interested in Warhammer, pick this up. And this is on the other side of the table, Warhammer Fantasy, and this is Skaven Slayer. And this is about Gotrix and Felix, who are two characters, the Slayer Dwarf and the kind of human bard sort of character. And again, it's their journeys throughout the world of Warhammer Fantasy and how they kind of come across the different races and how they kind of end up in these adventures. Skaven Slayer, which is one I read, was really great. It kind of gave you some insight into the Skaven, which are a really funny kind of race of characters who are always like creating crazy weapons but always backstabbing each other and always kind of like failing spectacularly, but there's so many of them that their numbers overwhelm. So this was a great, funny story, but really great. So even if you don't know anything about Warhammer Fantasy, again, pick this up. And like Warhammer 40k, it's a tabletop game, but it gets better because you have these stories. So again, these are really good. Last one, very quickly, is The Damnation of Pythos, which is another Horus Heresy novel that I've got. And the reason why I wanted to pick this up was because I got this off eBay, I think. But look, this is without the dust jacket, and just look how cool that is as a book. Just a book cover, that's incredible. And I haven't read this one yet, which I seem to say a lot with these books, but so many books, so little time. But again, I just think this is another example of great, great expansion of games to make them better. So overall, I think games and their novels just make everything better. They make the games better. I'm kind of waffling a little bit here, but the games are better because of the expansion. And your favorite game may have a novel attached to it that builds upon the game. If it's a novelization, take it with a pinch of salt. If you've already played the game, it might not be your cup of tea, but otherwise it might be great for you to learn more about the characters and more about the world if you're interested in. Some other games I can think off the top of my head is such as Borderlands, which is John Shirley, who wrote the Rapture book. He also wrote games for Borderlands. It's based on the first Vault Hunters. Halo, I mentioned earlier, Bioshock, which has got Mass Effect. I think there's quite a few of the games. I know Tomb Raider has some based on it, and I think Overwatch, which is another Blizzard game, part of World of Warcraft, has started to get some. Oh, and that was the other one. League of Legends also has a lot of kind of like, has I think 2 novels at the moment, but has a lot of background lore. So if you're interested in any of those games, I recommend picking up the novels. But yeah, that's just one way you can expand your knowledge. So thank you very much for watching, and please, like, comment, and subscribe. Cool. See you in the next one.